Living your best life with Senior Choices for you. Welcome. I'm your host, Brent Veasey. As always, let's get the easy stuff out of the way. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Brent? Well, it's pretty simple. You can reach out on the old 936-900-3190 mobile phone line with a text or a call, or you can reach out on the Instagram at senior_choices. So much to go on today, so much going on today, and a lot of things going on a big picture perspective of things. So I want to try to start with something that has just happened to me that I think is something that's I didn't know about it. And I think there's a lot of other people out there that may not know about this either. So let's start with the old rock hits your windshield and you get a little bit of a ding, chip, crack. Any of those ring a bell for you? It did for me. Driving down a highway, nobody was around me. No one. Okay. And minding my own business. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear, and this something, rock, pebble, whatever, hits my windshield. Now, I have rocks and stuff hit my windshield all the time as I drive. And I guess it's just because the windshields weren't used to yesterday's super, super cold versus what we've been getting and the rain on top of it. So in any case, of course, there's this little indentation, a little bit of crack starting on my windshield. And I was like going, crap, really? No one's around and this happens? How does this happen? I don't get it. So today, as I was driving around in my town and I come across this grocery store, H-E-B, which is big in Texas. So all of our Texas listeners understand H-E-B. So H-E-B, and there's this little tent thing, pop-up tent, and it's basically a guy that repairs chips and windshields, okay? So I go and say, hey, this just happened yesterday, so, can you, and he's like, yeah, I can fix that. It's no problem. Should be easy peasy, right? And so he's like, cash, will you pay out of, pocket, or do you want to file for your insurance? I was like, well, if I file with my insurance, it's going to be a claim. And he's like, yeah, and you know how they go with the claims. I was like, yeah, I'll just pay out of pocket. So, about $50. Okay. And the guy does this thing, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, wham, bam, done. I was like, wow. And it looks pretty doggone good. So I asked, I was like, so this had just started, which he did say, tip number 1, as soon as you get that crack going on your windshield, okay, get it to a repair person like this guy, okay? Do that because that increases the potential for you to have a very successful repair like I did today, where they're able to fix it and your windshield looks basically almost brand new, okay? And then you don't have to worry about trying to replace your windshield $500 later when the crack goes all the way across and all that good stuff. So don't wait. The moment that you see that happen, get it fixed, okay? So that's tip number 1. But tip number 2 was also very interesting, and I did not know this, okay? Because I thought that once a crack got beyond a certain length, okay, that it was going to be impossible for them to fix. So I just straight up asked, I said, so how long does something have to be in order for it to not be repairable by you? And he's like, well, we tell the insurance companies that it's about 6 inches. So 6 inches, we can take, a ruler and we go about 6 inches And he was like, so if you're able to get it done for 6 inches, I've seen us do it for like a foot and a half, even 2 feet. I was like, seriously? He's like, yeah, seriously. We can fix it. Now, here's the caveats. Okay? If the crack is starting on the edge, there's about 3 inches of your windshield, okay, on the edges. So if it's starting from there and then going inward, so it starts on the outside and going in, that outside area, that's the most problematic part of your windshield to be able to get fixed. Okay? And, it's like a crapshoot. If you're going to take the dice and what happens? Don't know. Okay? So if it starts over there, that might be a problem. Okay? Also, if it's already started to splinter in multiple directions, so you got like a kind of a little star symbol already starting, okay, that gets a little bit trickier for them as well. As soon as that starts, if you have a star happen, you got to get that one in quick, okay, because you don't want them to go too long, and you want to get that addressed. They can still try to fix it and get it done, okay, but that single crack, it can be up to almost 2 feet for them to be able to repair them and repair them well, and so that it will last, okay? If the star thing happens and it gets beyond 6 inches, you're basically going to have to take that windshield and get it replaced, okay? But the repair guy said 6 inches is what they tell the insurance, but 1.5 to 2 feet on a single crack. So keep that in mind, folks. I did not know that. Maybe y'all do. But I didn't know that. And it's a lot better paying $50 to get a crack fixed than paying 500 and something bucks to get a new windshield, which for some vehicles, it can be as much as $500. I mean, I've gotten mine done for about $300, but it can be as much as that $500 because I've had to replace some $500 vehicle windshields before. And that's not a good thing. Okay. So that was something that happened today that I thought would be rather useful because that's a senior choice. Okay. That I made today that ended up saving my family a bunch of money. And I learned something also in the process that it's not just the little bitty small cracks, but I mean, 1.5 to 2 feet. I mean, that's a decent sized crack that they could still repair. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're moving forward. Okay. When it's colder weather, it's a little bit more difficult for them to get the stuff to gel the way they want it. So it may take a little bit longer for them to do that on a repair. Just keep that in mind. But otherwise, that's a good tip for us to have in mind. Another good tip is it's crazy out there. And we're going to start our next segment talking about some of that craziness by our favorite town, Washington, D.C., folks. When we come back after this station break, we're going to talk more about what's going on there here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey, and in our first segment, current event, my windshield experience, okay? And how a windshield repair on a crack can be done with like 1.5 feet, maybe even 2 foot long single crack, okay? So I learned something today. Hopefully you learned something today, and we can be beneficial with our pocketbooks now because we now know that these windshields that can be several $100s to replace can be done with a repair that only costs maybe $50 to $70. Okay. So that's a good tip for us to have in mind. But now we got to get into our serious stuff that we've got going right now. And there's a lot of it, unfortunately. And let's start with Washington, D.C. The House has a leader. Yes. They finally were able to find someone that all the Republicans could agree on that would be able to be Speaker of the House, second in line to the presidency, a very powerful, important position, because without this person in this position, the House of Representatives and Congress cannot pass legislation, which we kind of need right now, right? So they found this guy that's basically called a backbencher, someone that's relatively new to Congress. He's been there for about 8 years-ish. He's from Louisiana. His name is Mike Johnson. So we now have Speaker Mike Johnson from Louisiana. Okay? And all the Republicans were able to agree on this guy because, well, one, he's only been there 8 years. So he hasn't really been there long enough to alienate anyone or piss anyone off. But two, he also has very little record of how things he would want to be able to do. He's very religious, okay, conservative Christian, and that's how he kind of has as his moral compass for doing things. But he says that's not what we need to have brought into lawmaking. Okay, so he's one of those people that is trying to keep the personal belief away from the public political belief. Okay, interesting concept, isn't it? Okay, interesting because I know on the show that we've talked about our president and how he has some personal beliefs that are actually contradictory to some of his policy beliefs. Okay. He is an ardent Catholic president, and he has some ideas from there because of his religion on how certain social matters could transpire. Okay. But he has spent his public life making sure that his personal belief that's over here doesn't come into his public belief of policy that needs to be over here. Okay? So he's been able to keep these things separate. And that's very important, I believe. Okay? Because our political system, okay, has to have as a basis the U.S. Constitution, right? The United States Constitution is the basis of our system. We are a constitutional democratic republic. That is what our founding fathers decided 247 years ago in 1776. That's what we're supposed to be all about. Are these rules that they wrote down and established within our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, that should be the basis for how we operate as a society, as a country. Okay? A lot of those rules talks about freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, a lot of freedoms. Okay? But a lot of those rules also made it clear, because of the relationship that the United States had with the British Empire, that we were going to have a separation of church and state. Okay? That is something that's very, very important to our founding fathers because of what had happened with the relationship with England. Okay? Where the king, the sovereign, was also head of the Church of England. They were one and the same. And a lot of things that happened within the church bled over into what happened with the sovereign. And that resulted in a lot of freedoms being suppressed, a lot of other things that we experienced as a colony to the British Empire for over 100 years as an imperial colony of the British Empire. So all of this shaped our founding fathers' desires and belief that we had to keep religion and state separate. Okay? We see God mentioned throughout the Constitution, throughout the Declaration of Independence, but they wanted it to be clear that there wasn't going to be a state-sponsored religion, and the two, government and religion, were going to be separate. Why? Because you can't have a government religion and a central religion if you're going to have freedom of religion. If everyone's going to be able to worship however they see fit, a divine being, God, a divine entity, whatever it is, then you can't have a central religion, because that religion is going to demand that it has exclusivity. That's how it works, folks. Okay? So even though in England at the time that they had the Church of England, they had difficulties with maintaining that separation. In fact, you ended up having a civil war in England that was strictly based on religious belief. Okay? The War of the Roses, okay, was all about having Catholicism and the Church of England not being able to be in the same space, literally, and causing issues with leadership as well for that same reason. Because you had sovereigns that wanted to be part of the Church of England, and then you had sovereigns that were Catholicists, belief in the Catholic Church, that wanted to follow Catholic Church doctrine. And it resulted in a civil war at one point. Okay? So when we come back after the station break, we're going to finish this discussion and how it bleeds into what's going on in Washington right now, here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey. We can't forget about our great show music provided by the Silverman Sound Studio and Shane Ivers at silvermansoundstudio.com. This website has royalty-free music available for download and use. All they ask is that you mention them after you use their music, like we're doing right now, and how they are supported by donations made on the website. It's a great resource with some great music options available, so please check it out and support it. So, we have a speaker who is deeply religious, but he says that his religious beliefs will be separate from the policy that he knows he needs to create. Okay? We have to see whether this is going to actually transpire. Why is this such a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because it was very big for our founding fathers. Because they wanted to keep our policy and government and religion separated. Separation of church and state. And all of this was happening because of what had happened with the previous relationship with the British Empire. And how they saw things transpire with their relationship with the colonies, but also what transpired within the boundaries of England itself, where they had civil war that was very bloody, lasted several years between Catholics and Protestants within the Church of England and within England itself. All of this gets to the point that we have here in our country. And that is that our founding fathers expected us to do this because they thought that that's the best way that we were going to maintain our great experiment called democracy. Because to protect these diverse freedoms that we have out there, we have to make sure that we're looking at it from the lens of what's best for those freedoms in our democratic constitutional republic society. Okay? And that can be very difficult when you're looking at it through a specific religious lens. Now, does this mean that everything has to be divorced from religion in our policy discourse? No, because religion is at its heart the foundation for many of us, for our beliefs, our worldviews, and how things are supposed to happen within our relationships, our partnerships, and interactions. Okay? So this is very important to a lot of people. And it's going to therefore kind of color how we look at things. Okay? So shading is okay. Okay? But when we start saying that we have to do what the religion says, that's when it gets to be more problematic. Okay? Because sometimes religion doesn't necessarily say that we need to look at everyone's freedoms, everyone's rights first. It's more of a moralistic black and white. Good, bad. Okay? And if it's black and white, it doesn't allow for more shades of gray on things. And sometimes when we're looking at rights, freedoms, there's more shade of gray that's there that has to be acknowledged and has to be in some ways addressed and allowed to breathe. Okay? Recently, I think you can see that there's been a lot of public officials that aren't necessarily taking that approach with how they're looking at policy being made. Because you see a lot of religious doctrine being spilling out into the policy arena. Okay? And therefore, you have some more intolerant perspectives on things rearing their heads, for lack of a better term. That's why this is important. Okay? Because when it comes to these aspects, it may not just be black and white. There is going to be some gray. Okay? And one of the best examples of that is that there are a number of us that look at religion and say that homosexuality is wrong. Okay? And because of that, then that particular aspect should be minimized within society as much as possible. Okay? Well, that minimization process for these individuals means that they are not trying to interface with them. They don't want to be able to give them the ability to do some things that could involve some religious components, like getting married, for example, and maybe even impacting their ability to have health care done if they happen to be people that are transgender. Okay. So that's a lot of religious belief that's involved with that. And I'm not going to sit there and say anything that they are right or wrong in that belief, because that's not for me to judge. It's not for any of us to judge. Okay. But what I am going to make the observation on that is important for us in our constitutional Republican democracy is that these individuals have individual rights and freedoms that our Constitution says they have. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was put into the preamble, the first words that our founding fathers put into paper. Not into, but onto. You know what it means. But the first words put on paper were these. And then they built the Constitution around those words. That's how important they felt this to be. So after this station break, we're going to continue looking at this in a little bit greater detail here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned.